You Bay with Millennium News 24, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic that the people across the United States need to know the laws within this country, because it's very important what's going on when there's so much different changes going on. I don't know if anybody's paying attention, but all the Social Security offices are being shut down, and it's not even on the news. Nobody's talking about it on the local news or any place in the country, but the Social Security offices are being shut down. And of course, reason why I'm aware of it, because, we deal with Social Security, and when we go to these offices, they shut down. And when you go to another office, they shut down. And so it seems like, these offices are going to be shut down. So I don't know if this is going to be a situation that's going to hurt a lot of people, that these offices are shut down. People are used to walking up in to the Social Security Administration office and getting their income statement for the year, or they may want to file taxes on it, and they're not going to have no access. But again, this topic is going to be about law and equity. This is in the United States Constitution, Article 3, where it says the judicial authority shall extend in all cases in law and inequity. All right, I have a special guest on by the name of Amin Bey, and of course, he's a student of law. I've been studying law for 30 years, and I've been doing a lot of pro se litigant cases for myself and help assist others. All right, but you were, brother. Amin Bey.
All right, Pete.
You on?
All right.
You on?
All right, yeah. So, that's a good time.
You could just start off how you started off. It's coming to studying law, and that's start off, from that aspect.
Okay. Yeah. So, my name is Nakian Bey. In the Alabama territory, at the Alabama territory, and I got into studying law, getting into the legal system, basically getting into legal problems. Happened to go inside of Desmond Cripps, and that opened up my eyes on how this judicial system actually worked. And what I did was I came into contact of you, by way of communication, and told me to learn the procedure, because I was just so focused on just free form and doing what I wanted to do, and that technically wasn't the right way. I was getting things denied, not knowing, the procedure. So that's what I normally mainly focus on. And I try to, when I teach people or relay the information to them that I didn't have, is to know the procedure, the basic fundamentals, is the approach to go. Like, for an example, the sources of law. You have primary sources, secondary sources.
True.
Primary sources deal with the Constitution, which is the foundation. You have the treaties too, also case law, statutes, and regulatory rules. These are the foundation of the sources of law, being the primary source, which one would use in their pleadings. And within that is the primary source specifically to the individual, him or herself. And then you have secondary sources, which is legal encyclopedias, law dictionaries, whether it's Ballottines or Black's Law, Aaron's Law Dictionary, whatever particular dictionary, or your corporate jurisprudence, American jurisprudence. All these secondary sources, treaties, are secondary sources. So these sources that one would use to link them to a primary source. So whatever your issue is, so like you address the issue dealing with Social Security, where you need to go to a primary source statute that deals with Social Security and relate the fact how that actually applies to you. So I'm more so on the fundamental approach, and that be the main issue that I see. A lot of I would say the American public, we don't have a public legal education. That's a real issue, in this country. We don't have that, and when we get into a situation, we're gonna have to go into a courtroom, right? And I'm a part of the Phi Alpha Delta Society. It's a legal fraternity, and I'll be quick to tell you that now law school is getting prepared. At this point, where they stepping it up, where students are allowed to learn how to do like derogatories and stuff like that, because at one point at a time, it wasn't in the curriculum, and you just graduate law school and, now you got to get hands-on and you don't know what to do.
True.
So even the issue with individuals who are attending paralegal school, law school, etc. All right. So, just to throw that out there, but, as you may.
Yes. You kind of remind me, Brother Amun, that about several years ago, possibly 10, a young woman was taking up paralegal as an associate degree. And of course, she's a friend of one of my daughters, and she told her friend that I can help her in putting something together. And so when I met with the friend, what I had to do was ask her that the instructor gave her a case law because she had to do a dissertation on it. And so she said, no, the instructor wanted her to look up a case law. I said, excellent. I'm going to tell you why. And what was the interesting thing about it is that when you start going into law, especially in this system that we are at, the question is, where do you see us in law? Now, a couple of Fridays ago, I had Brother Siraj Bey on, and we was talking about the Birthright Citizenship Act. And one of the things that we brought out was that in Exodus, the 21st chapter, that was the prototype to the Christian Black Codes of 1724, right? And when you start reading those articles in the Christian Black Codes of 1724, you can see how we were being mistreated under the colonial rule and law in this land. All right. So why I'm saying this, because the young lady who I was helping, I said, you know what we're going to do your dissertation on? The Dred Scott case. Because majority of our brothers and sisters who goes into law school or either paralegal school, all right, do not know anything about the Dred Scott case, right? So I pulled the case. This is almost nearly 400 pages. And so I sat down with her and I went over the case. Of course, we had pen and paper. I wanted her to take notes, as we was going through it, because those notes that we are going to be going through is going to be the same notes that we're going to use to put her dissertation together. All right. And so it was interesting because as I was assisting her with this case with Dred Scott and then structuring it for her, and how I structured it for her while she got like an A+ on it is because of the fact that I structured it in a way where it was sort of like a litigation type of structure. It wasn't something that we just put together an argument or summary on what the Dred Scott case was about, but we structured it in a way where you would see who were the parties involved, right? As far as the title action, in reference to Dred Scott and Sandiford, who he took to court in Missouri, the state of Missouri at that time, because Sandiford was a citizen of the state of New York, and Dred Scott was being transferred back and forth for work. So he was most likely an indentured servant. Dred Scott was not a slave because he was working in Missouri. And when he got paid, all right, of course, his supervisor, of course, got paid, or slave master, or whatever you want to style it today, which would be an employer if you want to style it today. And so he had an opportunity, which he did, sue his employer. Some would say back then the slave master, to be clear. So what I'm saying is that I had to explain to her and others who don't really know about the Dred Scott case what was the reason why Dred Scott sued his employer at that time? All right. People would say, oh, he was suing for his freedom. And I said, that's not true. Dred Scott did not go to the state of Missouri to sue for his freedom. Because remember, he was going back and forth from New York to Missouri to work. So he could have sued any given time for his freedom. So he was technically employed or an indentured servant at that time. So what was the real reason why, other than what people would say is freedom? All right, because the Bar Association or the American Bar Association, all these attorneys, esquires, and lawyers would say, oh, Dred Scott was suing for his freedom. They don't really want to tell you what was the real cause why he was suing for his alleged freedom. You said, well, what is the real cause? Because the employer or the slave master was sexually molesting his wife and his two daughters. And like people don't know that. So when he got back to New York and noticed that this employer or slave master was violating his wife and two daughters, that's what made him go and sue for his freedom, so that way he can remove his wife and daughters out of that situation. That's what that was about. And he did win his case in the state of Missouri. All right. But Roger B. Taney, which was the Chief Justice at that particular time of the Dred Scott case, right, ruled against Dred Scott, because when Santa Fe lost in the state of Missouri, they brought it over to the Supreme Court. And what happened was that Roger B. Taney stated that the employer or the slave master, whatever how you want to label him, was the citizen of the state of New York, and that Dred Scott was not the citizen of the state of Missouri. All right. But even though he wasn't a citizen of the state of Missouri, you could not bring somebody in bondage or indentured servitude in the state of Missouri to work. So that's why they rule in his favor, not because he was not a citizen, because you would have those who would argue and say that he was a citizen. Well, he was not a citizen, excuse me. And, you know, but he won his case regardless. All right. To try to get his wife and children up out of that situation, you know, but she got an A+ on that. And this is why people need to know about the Black's Law Dictionary, you know, and study the language of law. Because like you stated before, you know, people's going to want to go into court. And we didn't get legalese in school. We should have gotten it from junior high school, all through junior high school, all the way up to high school. All right. Because how are they going to say that you're a law-abiding citizen if you don't know the law? And the school system is where the place where you should learn the law. Now, they do got a John Jay High School in New York. All right. They do got one, you know, so, but it's just interesting that the years that I was going to school and the years you was going to school, they didn't have it. You know, they didn't have it, you know, so it's just interesting that when you look back, you know, the years passing, you never got that education in school for law. And then, like you said, when you run into a trouble, you know, it could be jaywalking, it could be a traffic ticket, a parking ticket, you know, whatever they may want to charge you. All right. How do you defend yourself? You know, when you look in the Black's Law Dictionary, look up the word civilian, like in the 6th edition, you know, because it's very important to know what editions that you look into, because different editions of the Black's Law have different definitions and different words that may be in one dictionary that's not in another. But the word civilian is one who's skilled or learned in law. So if this population is a civilian population, well, how could this be a civilian population if they're not what? Learned or skilled in law. You see what I'm saying? And when you see the definition, you start saying, wow, you know, they're saying I'm a civilian, but how could I be a civilian and don't know the law? And then they'll be the first one to say ignorance of the law is no excuse. You know, that's the interesting thing about how they would hold it to you. And if you notice in the courtrooms, they would always want to give you an attorney or a lawyer. All right. With subterfuge, because you don't know anything about your legal rights to defend yourself, juridically speaking, you know. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a commercial break and we're going to come back and we're going to elaborate even more. All right.
All right.
Hello viewers, you are watching Millennium News 24. America and global villages seen America independence built by immigrants, manufacturers, roads, highways, educations, healthcare, IT, scientists, space, business development to all thousands of multimedia and all major social media platforms and news network in America. Millennium News 24, one of truthfully news networks in America and global news organizations. Please watch, follow and subscribe. We are in iOS and Android devices, Roku, Amazon, Apple devices, all smart TV, globally Horizon satellite, social media Millennium News 24, Millennium TV 24. Website www.millenniumnews24.com and www.millenniumtv24.com. Thank you.
Yes, and we back with our special guest, Amun Bey, and we're talking about law, all right? Because in this society, it's so many people got caught up in the criminal processing, throughout the United States. There's so many jails that's filled up, so many prisons and penitentiaries that filled up. And because of the fact that we don't know the laws, because the district attorneys in these various different states and counties are prosecuting people with more like malicious prosecution. All right.
Yes.
And you could be doing time that doesn't even require it by that statute. And I want to also share this too, that the statutes that they use in these courtrooms throughout the United States, we don't even know if those statutes are still active statutes, because you could be being charged with a statute that's inactive. And how would you know if it's inactive? Well, you got to look into it. You got to find out from the legislator of the state of where you located at, and whatever criminal statute you was charged with, you have to see if that statute did it expire, just like the Civil Rights Act expires every 20 years. So again, a lot of our people don't know that these statutes do expire. All right. And so it's very important that us empower ourselves with legal knowledge as a shield to protect ourselves, from the system, because they're making billions and billions of dollars. There was a commercial on television years ago where it says crime doesn't pay. That's not true. Crime is $1 billion industry. You know what I'm saying, brother? What else would you like to share with our viewers, brother, concerning what you study in law?
To touch back on what you said before we went on break.
Yes.
Not knowing what to do, I like to get an audience. This is a fundamental approach. If you were to get into a legal situation, or a situation where you have to go to court, legal, lawful, what you want to do is you want to be informed, of course. This is what we're going over now. You want to give that attorney instructions, all right? Because if you go to a paralegal school, law school, it may not be mandatory depending on what school that one may go to, but you don't have to take rules of professional responsibility, rules of professional conduct.
Yes.
And it's very important to apply that in any particular situation that you may have, because you may not be competent, to represent yourself in court.
True.
Which is okay. So that's why the rules of professional responsibility and conduct come into place. Now, specifically, is Rule 1.2, which is scope of representation and allocation of authority between client and lawyer. All right. And in the paragraph 1, it states, paragraph A confers upon the client the ultimate authority to determine the purpose to be served by legal representation within the limits imposed by law and the lawyer's professional obligation. All right. So you need to keep in mind that within the scope of this rule, the attorney must abide by your decision.
True.
So if you're the client, you're supposed to give instructions to your attorney on what you want him or her to do. They can't wiggle out of that. You see what I'm saying? So that's a lot of things. Excuse me. That's something that I didn't know. On many other things that it's very powerful. Because you can give that attorney instructions on what you want him or her to do, and you can get it certified, file it within the court. So that way, if you have an issue where you was misrepresented, this is like if you was in a criminal case, of course, you will have grounds for ineffective fiscal counsel.
That's correct.
So you want to have a paper trail of what you have going on. Even not just technically criminal, it can be family court. Any particular court where this attorney is going to represent you, you always want to be informed. And with what we talked about, the primary sources, what apply to your situation, the facts of your case, and give him instruction on what you want him or her to do. That's very important.
What you're saying, Brother Amun, is very, very important, because I'm going to add on to what you're stating that people need to be aware of. The professional rules of conduct is one of the main rules of conduct for an attorney, that one needs to peruse through that and just pick out a certain section that what the attorney is not doing, because he have to comply to those rules, as you stated. Another factor is the retainers contract. All right, because the instructions that you're talking about can be expressed in a retainers contract. All right, and because you're going to pay a retainers fee, and so what you stating is true. But one would have to get. And it's online, you don't have to go to the law library or anything. It's actually online concerning the professional code of conduct for attorneys. And you can go through that. People can go through that, right? And when they get an attorney and they're going to pay for an attorney, regardless of, like you said, it could be a criminal case, it can be a civil case, personal injury case. All right. You can look through there and peruse, and you can pick out exactly what you want stipulated, what you want the attorney to do based upon your situation. And that becomes a contract. That becomes a contract. And once that attorney breaches that contract, he could be sued. And then they got the lawyer skill, all right, for clients' fund for attorneys who have ineffective of counsel. So people need to be aware of these things, because, I've heard so many people over the years have paid so much money to an attorney, and they have lost a tremendous amount of money, and that's in the criminal case. All right. Because they figured they paid for an attorney. All right. They figured they would get a better shot in their case if they paid for an attorney, which is not true, because I've been aware of quite a number of people who have paid a substantial amount of money, and the attorney just didn't do anything, and you can get your money back, because that's a breach of contract, So I think it's very important that people have at least the basics, all right? Because we can go into other things, but I like to be able to give people information that's going to immediately help them, because there's some people out there right now who may be watching us, probably going to say, well, wow, what can we do right away? We got an attorney, we paid this money, he's not doing things. Then you can file a complaint with the Bar Association, all right, or the American Bar against that attorney, but using the same professional rules of conduct against that attorney of what he didn't do, that he breached that contract, and your retainers contract would go along with that complaint. So you can see exactly, what this complaint in details that the attorney breached. So we want to give this the basic information, because yourself and I, we can go into some very heavy legalities that may go over a lot of heads, and I think it's very important that people would have that information and that knowledge,
Yes.
Anything you would like to chime in on?
Yes. So you always want to get the foundation, you know, you always want to get the fundamental, because law is extensive, you know.
Very.
I mean, if you can pretty much think of it, it's probably a law that governs that subject matter. So very important that you get the fundamentals, and dealing with the rules of professional conduct. Lawyers, attorneys, paralegal, they're supposed to scrutinize each other's work. Excuse me.
True.
So each of let's say, like, I recognize this attorney is violating the rules of professional responsibility. I'm an attorney. I'm supposed to file a complaint. I'm supposed to make noise on that.
But they're not going to do that. You're right. But they're not going to, because they're colleagues. But you're right. That's what they're supposed to do.
And all the time too, they be extremely busy. You see what I'm saying? These people be so, you wouldn't imagine, you know, how powerful this stuff is, because it's a factory system almost. Like, you go in, like you mentioned, the retainer fee, which is good.
Yes.
You pay their retainer fee. How paralegals make their money in these law firms is by billing. Yeah,
billing hours.
Billing hours.
Yes.
They crush you on the billing hour, and it's a retainer fee of $5,000. Once they run through those funds, you're gonna have to add that $5,000 back on your account in order for that firm to properly represent you. If you don't have that amount of the retainer fee, then they jump off the case.
Yeah.
So it's very key, you know, that people know that and apply, you know, the fundamental approach to the rules of professional responsibility. Excuse me. So if something happened like that, you have a way or something that you can stand on by way of, you know, you filing a complaint and then filing, a civil complaint to sue.
True.
You know, it's very important that people know that, because a lot of times, like you said too, you know, you get into a criminal situation, and you feel like, okay, well, I paid this attorney $30,000, he go do X, Y, Z. No. If it's not in writing, you know, it's not real. Just because it's in writing doesn't mean it's real. You need to be the one to put in writing, you know, what you want him or her to do. And also too, what would be very important is you want to ask, is that attorney is a trial attorney?
That's right. Trial attorney is company. That's right.
Right. Because, you know, a large percentage don't have trial competency because it's not taught in school. You're going to get that later on.
Yes, that's experience in the courtroom. That's right.
Right. Just because you have the degree, you know, anybody can study for a test and pass a test. If you put the hours in to study to pass a test, eventually you will pass the test. So, but that doesn't mean that you're competent in procedure. And then you take, then, you know, the client give them $30,000 just for say, and then you get into court. All thing he finna do is work out a plea deal with the district attorney. Don't put in no effort, and your $30,000 don't went down the drain. You know, so that's what I'm here for, to get people to think from a fundamental approach.
Yes.
So question.
Yes.
You know,
well, what we're going to do, we're going to take a commercial break. We're going to come back. We're going to go into more details so we can help people protect themselves, especially with this retainers contract, which is important. So we're going on commercial break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Millennium News 24, your trusted source for accurate, unbiased news. We're here to bring you the stories that matter most from America and around the world, with integrity and a commitment to truth. In today's world, where misinformation can easily spread, having access to reliable news is more important than ever. At Millennium News 24, we aim to cut through the noise by delivering clear, fact-based reporting. Whether you're following major events or looking for in-depth analysis, we are here to serve you with transparency and respect for all communities regardless of color, wealth, or religion. This beautiful America was built by the resilience of its people, immigrants, entrepreneurs, doctors, and everyday individuals working together to create something great. It's this spirit that inspires us to provide you with news that's inclusive, honest, and relevant. We believe that informed citizens are the foundation of a strong society, and we strive to give you the knowledge you need to make a difference. From breaking news to insightful features, we bring you comprehensive coverage on politics, economics, health, culture, and much more. We believe that everyone deserves access to the truth, and we are proud to be a part of a global network that connects people through information. Stay informed by following us on your devices, including iOS, Android, Roku, Amazon, Apple TV, and Smart TVS. And for global access, we're also available on Horizon Satellite. Visit us at www.millenniumtv24.com or www.millenniumnews24.com to stay updated at Millennium News 24. Our mission is to promote unity, understanding, and progress in a rapidly changing world. Join us as we work to inspire positive action through the power of truth. Thank you for watching. Follow us, subscribe, and stay informed.
Yes, we're back, and I love the commercial break because one thing that was said is to keep the people to stay informed, and this is exactly what we are doing, is to keep the people informed, because when people is not informed, other people have a tendency to violate their rights when these things does occur. What I wanted to say, right after the break, was that when you have a retainers contract, which is a very important contract, regardless if it's a civil or criminal case, you must have a retainers contract. All right. People don't seem to realize that's the reality of keeping a lawyer bound to his duty in a contract, according to the professional code of responsibility. And what I wanted to say was this: if it's a criminal case, for those who are out there, because there's a lot of criminal cases going on besides civil, and this goes to civil too, you have to spell out what you want in that contract to be done, but you just don't spell it out from your own recognizance. All right. What you need to do is stay within the bounds and the needs of the circle of the legal system, meaning that if it's a criminal case, you will want to have an omnibus language, sort of like almost like a motion, but you're going to use the language of an omnibus in your retainers contract. You're also going to want to have not only the omnibus, but the Brady material. All right. Those are the two most dominant arguments that attorneys in criminal cases uses, all right, to fight these cases. All right. When you have an omnibus language in your retainers contract, and you have, language such as the Brady material, because you have brought out a very important point on that, when you do hire an attorney for $30,000, he got you down as a plea deal. There's a federal statute. I don't recall the statute. I have to go back and look. That's against plea deals. But what goes on in the state? There's a federal statute that goes against plea deals. I remember reading that about 25 years ago. And a lot of people don't know that that's really a federal offense to walk you into a plea deal. I remember one particular Moore, he had a criminal case pending against him, and the court had him into a plea deal. But a plea deal is against the law. A lot of people don't know this. All right. I don't see that in state statutes, but it's definitely federal. And the state statute is supposed to follow the federal statute. Well, anyway, he got into a plea deal because he was back up against the wall. So we know what he did. He turned around and he filed an appeal. He filed an appeal and won his case on the appeal. Most people don't know that. That's why if you hear some of these judges, they say, did anybody force you or to offer you something? If you accept this plea deal, you cannot file an appeal. That's not true. They
Right.
want you think that because you had a plea bill and you didn't know no better, all right, that your appeal is waived. That's not true, because this particular brother that I know personally filed an appeal and won his appeal. And you know what was interesting about it, Amun, was the fact that when he won his appeal, the way the trial court had it set up, that he was supposed to go and meet the probationary officer, right? But because he didn't meet the probationary officer, when they seen the brother on the street, they arrested him, locked him down, brought him before the court in front of the same judge. And when it was time for him to speak, he said the court wanted to know why he didn't show up for probation, is why he was arrested. He said, well, why would I have to show up for probation when I just won my case on the appeal? And as soon as he said that, the court shut everything down. Because why? The court did not want the public to know, those who were in the sitting listening, they didn't want them to know that you can file an appeal. So they got it set up that if you do a plea deal, you know you can't file an appeal. Where you get that from? You have a right to an appeal, and you have to pay for that appeal. So why is these judges acting clandestine in the legal system when they know that an appeal is a right, no matter if it's a civil or criminal case? You have a right to an appeal because you don't agree with the judge's decision, or you may not agree with the jury's decision, and you can file an appeal, you know? So I think it's very important that I stress that. You know, you want to chime in on that?
Yes, what I was thinking to say, you know, law always have an exception. You know, they'll say, you know, this law states this, and you got to keep in mind that it's an exception to that. So you got to look at the constitutionality of a plea.
True.
You know what I'm saying? So you cop out, just say, okay, well, you know, it's not appealable. That's not true, because the exception go back to the constitutionality of the plea. And now, if I'm not mistaken, what you was talking about dealing with the federal statute is under 3407 of the Uniform Commercial Code, dealing with alteration of the instrument.
Yes.
So that's so going into, like, you know, the changing the plea from a different plea. You know, they alter the instrument technically, which a lot of those indictments, you know, only state conclusionary law. They don't go into the fact, the who, what, when, where, how, why. They just list the statute, and you know that's an issue. And so you don't challenge that, you know, you be sitting in jail or fighting a case of finna go, and the statute just read plainly. The indictment read plainly based off the statute, but they don't go into detail. That's the issue. You know, the only
I was just about to say, not to interrupt you, but I was about to say that you brought up a very good point, is what I was saying before, that the indictment, how we don't know that the statute is inactive. If the statute is inactive, that means that the indictment is no good, it's moot. But because we don't know these things, we wind up doing time, not having no legal knowledge to find out if these statutes are active or inactive, because they expire just like the Civil Rights Act or bill. All bills expire. All statutes is based upon bills that's legislated by the legislators of every state. And they do have an expiration date. You know?
Right. That's very true. I thought it muted out. Excuse me. Yeah, it's very true to have that, you know, in your concept, because a lot of times, majority of the time, we don't know. We don't know what, you know, what the law is anyway, right? So, you know, we wouldn't even think in terms, okay, well, is this still good law? Is the statute is still good law? You know, is it good law? You know, this particular you know, statute is being used in this case. You know, is it still good law? Is it binding?
Yes, it's positive law. That's right.
Is it positive law? Right.
Yeah.
These are questions that we don't know to ask, and
True.
we get in the situation, we don't know what to do. And the foundation, just to go from a fundamental approach, is to know again what source of law is being used in your particular case.
True.
So if it's a statute, what you would do is you would read the statute that apply to that, your issue, your fact, and you will also go and read court cases, because a lot of statutes just read plainly. So you need to go to court cases, legal precedent that's binding from the Supreme Court of that state or appellate court from that state.
True.
And get into the language of what these judges are saying about that particular case. You know what I mean? And
True.
Comprehending and knowing, the venue. If you at the state of New York, you can't use a New York case at California because that is not binding. So,
Noble, you got to be careful. I hear what you're saying, but you can use any case. They do it all the time. It's all on the news. Like, for instance, Wade versus Roe. Which state that was an issue? The major state, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But the people in New York or other places is protesting because they just equally being affected. Because remember, Congress is coming into the House. So because one state is putting a law out, we are not aware that the law in one state can affect other people in another state. Now, where is that in the Constitution? Because you brought out a very good point about the sources. That's Article 4 of the United States Constitution when it talks about
good faith and credit.
Good faith and credit. And then when they talk about the public record, that's a public record. Every state has a public record.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying is we have to be careful with that. Because it is a fact that other states' law, when they pass certain laws in certain other states, what happens is that other states wind up adopting that law.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? I think it's very, so I have to bring that up because I don't want people to think that what you just said earlier is true to a degree. I have to agree with you to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But it's a known fact, like Wade versus Roe in Arizona. Everybody was watching Arizona because that's the state that legislated that, and that became an issue where other states was adopting that. So now it's a situation where if that's being struck down, look what happened. It was like a domino effect in other states. Now, not all states, that's why I say I have to agree with you to a degree, because certain states is going to stand by the abortion. So they may run out of one state and go to another state for the abortion. You see, because other states didn't stand by that. They didn't adopt that law. So I noticed that there's always a conflict between states when it comes to laws. So I think it's very important that people even be aware of that. So you have to see within your state that your state adopted that law from another state, because they have a tendency to do that. Because remember, they come to the congressional floor. So all those state congressmen and women are in the House arguing these issues on the floor, like the issue right now with the digital currency. Trump got some currency going on, and I was watching that program with the Congress was talking about how dangerous that this digital coin, because if the coin collapse, that's going to hurt the U.S. economy. So you got some who was for the digital currency, and you got some who wasn't with it, and these are different congressmen and congresswomen from different states. So we have to be very, very careful and make sure that we have a panoramic view of what's going on in these various states and who's going to adopt it. And these are the things that I watch, very important, because these things affect people's lives. It affects people's lives, So what we're gonna do, we're gonna come back. We're gonna have another break for our viewers, and we're going to come back. All right. So thank you. We should be taking a break. We'll be right back. Oh, we should be having a commercial break right now. Yeah, we're having technical issues, but we'll be going to be going on a break shortly.
Hello viewers, you are watching Millennium News 24. America and global villages seen to America independence built by immigrants, manufacturers, roads, highways, educations, healthcare, IT, scientists, space business development to all thousands of multimedia and all major social media platforms and news network in America. Millennium News 24, one of truthfully news networks in America and global news organizations. Please watch, follow and subscribe. We are in iOS and Android devices, Roku, Amazon, Apple devices, all smart TV, globally Horizon satellite, social media Millennium News 24, Millennium TV 24. Website www.millenniumnews24.com and www.millenniumtv24.com. Thank you.
Yes, we're back, and we are talking about law that people need to have and need desperately today in the society, because it's just so much people are suffering in the legal system with foreclosures, credit card issues, especially when COVID had hit us so hard, and people just didn't have the finances because things was just locked down. And of course, the creditors and the lenders, they really didn't care what your conditions are. But let me be the first to tell you, because not that I only study law, but I study equity. And when the contracts are being endorsed by people, and don't make a difference what kind of contract it is. It could be a car loan, an student loan, a mortgage loan, deed of trust, credit cards, whatever that loan may be that you may sign that application. They have credit insurance, all right, or credit life insurance. All right. And a lot of people is not aware of these things because the lenders don't want people to know this information. So not only that law is very important, but equity, because we're dealing with contracts, regardless if it's a criminal case or civil case, don't make a difference what it is. All those cases is based upon contracts. And so earlier, as we were speaking about, when you get an attorney, hire an attorney, all right, one has to have the knowledge of what you want the attorney to do in that retainer's contract, all right, especially when it comes to criminal, because a lot of criminal cases going on today, and people is kicking out that money, and they wind up losing their money because the attorney is going along with the prosecutor, and then what do? Again, ineffective of counsel. They have what you call the lawyer skill client fund that one can apply for. All right. In reference to ineffective of counsel, one would have to draft out what happened in detail. And if you have any evidence to attach to that complaint, you can attach that complaint and send it to the Lawyers Guild, and they will review your case. All right. That's very important. You got a lot of lenders out there who got robocalling going on. All right. Or telemarketing going on, and they got law firms out there that you can get paid $1,000 for being harassed from the robocalls or from what you would call the telemarketing. So I think it's very important that people be informed or well informed, because sometimes people don't know where to go. You know what I'm saying, Brother Amun?
Yes.
People just don't know where to go. And so when we can inform people and give people a solid time foundation, to protect themselves juridically speaking concerning their rights, because you don't know how it's going to come, and so many people. I mean, the courtrooms are jam packed throughout the United States because people just do not know how to protect themselves. You would like to chime in, brother, because we're going to be closing out.
Yeah. Yeah. So dealing with the robocalls, you can file a complaint with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission.
True.
And you can put your number in there. Once you put your phone number in the Federal Trade Commission database, you'll receive a confirmation. You can print that out, and whoever calls you, without your consent, you pretty much can be swift, on your feet. You can make some, some coins off of that. Everything, like when I put my number in there, don't nobody call me no more. You know what I mean? So, but that's something that individuals can do if they get over fluctuated with a lot of these calls.
Yes.
Go to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and log in your phone number and get a confirmation. And that at that point, you'll be good to go. So whoever call your phone. If you can get that data, that information from them, you can put yourself in a position, to send them out a demand letter, for the amount, that you may wish to recover. It can't be just something just too far out there, but it have to be, within the bounds.
No, yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're right about that, because the law firms, I mean, when they violate the federal statute, which is 15 U.S.C. Section 1692. There is an amount which is $1,000, and so they're not going to let you max out like you want to, but at least that way you probably can get something out of it, for this harassment, and so it's good that information is pertinent, that people would learn and know about. All right, like other information that we have out there that we will put out for the viewers to utilize, across this country, so that way they can have a way to protect themselves. Because, when you don't have no knowledge of law and equity in this system, all right, it really puts you at a standstill, and also in a hardship. It puts you in a hardship, and so people need to be compensated for their damages. Because they don't know they're being damaged. And when telemarketing and robocalls constantly keep calling you 10, 15 times a day, that's it's a damage. When you read the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act, it tells you how many times they're supposed to contact you. And then most people got to go to that Fair Debt Collection Practice Act. All right, when you look into that, just as well as the FTC, so all this information is very helpful, that because people just don't know where to go, especially the ones who have language barriers. One who may speak French, won't speak Spanish, or you got those who may speak some African language that may not know English very well, and this information can be very helpful, very, very helpful, brother. And I appreciate you coming on, and encouraging the people, because you're a student, in law, and that's a wonderful thing, brother, because that way a lot of people can be assisted, because, you got the courts out there, office of representative or pro se office is what they call it, and you can go to those offices and pull up them forms, you know what I'm saying? Or sometimes those courts got things online that you can pull up and look at those forms and, peruse around and see what's going on, just to give you some insight, to give you some insight.
Well, depending on like where you at, a lot of the courthouses have law libraries.
True.
if they still, up and running. A lot of stuff is online. You can go to Google Scholar,
True,
and look up, look at court cases. On Google Scholar. So the information is out. The resources is out. Excuse me. We just need to know the proper information.
true,
The foundation, the basics on how this stuff actually works. Because, like we said, laws is real extensive.
very,
Equity extensive.
yeah,
Like, where do I start at? So you have to ask yourself a question. You'll ask yourself a question. How was I injured? Always keep in mind, say, what are the duties of X, Y, Z? What
true,
is the duties of this attorney? What is the duty of this? Let's say, whoever. You always want to ask, what's the duty? Always ask yourself the question, what is the duty of whoever you're dealing with? Because it's a duty that actually go along with his or her job. And so when you find that out, and the reason why I'm saying that, if you find that out, a bank officer, whoever, you can be able to impose liability. And what
True.
I learned was, if you can't impose liability, they're not going to move. You can be dead in the right, but if you don't have the proper information in order to impose liability, a lot of times it's not going to move.
Well, again, 12 USC represents the United States Code, Section 73, that people need to look into, because there's an oath of office that those financial institutions have to take. So it's very important. 12 USC Section 73 is what people can look into and contact that CEO of that financial institution. It'll make a difference. A bank, mortgage company, any other creditors or whatever. These things could be asked by law, and they have to submit these things because there's compliance. All right. The science is compliance, in different avenues of this system that we're in. All right. So thank you for coming on, brother. And we're about to close out. Yes, you're very welcome, brother. And hope to, bring you back again, so we can continue, because 1 hour is not enough really to go into this. It's extensive, like you said. And so you start off with where you at. That's why I tell people, start off with where you at. Where to start is where you at. Don't even try to go into anything extensive, because it may move away from your actual cause of what you're there for.
Right.
So I tell people, start off where you at. So again, so next Friday, we'll be back again, for our viewers in this Interfaith talk show. And we're going to have some other excellent guests coming on also. So thank you.
And you,
thank you.
and you have classes too, right?
Yeah, I give classes. We have a study group, we have a study group every Sunday, for 2 hours, to help people, they get on Zoom from across the country, anywhere in the world, technically, and if they have Zoom access, so we have a study class every Sunday between 7 and 9. And we talk about all these different issues, how to help resolve people's issues. And of course, 2 hours is not enough. That's why we have it continuously every Sunday. This is our 3rd year. It's a study group. We study law and equity. That's basically what it is. I don't want folks to think that we're giving legal advice or financial advice. No, we don't do none of that. Only thing we do is inform people with the statutes, with the laws, what it says. It's a study group. That's our platform.
It's insight.
Yes, right. It's insight. That's right. Not advice, but insight. So I'm glad you brought that up. All right, brother. So we'll be talking later on, definitely.
Yes.
All right.
All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, peace out.
Peace out. All right.